session, Touchworks 15.1, what's coming, and for me, this is like the most exciting release we've had in a really, really long time, and my goal is by the time you get up out of these seats and leave, you guys feel the same way. So why is this really like the most exciting release? And it's really because it's not about meaningful use and it's not about electronic control substances. So what that's really done is really afforded us the opportunity to invest in that big backlog that was growing because we were doing those things and all of the requests that you have because you offer suggestions. We have our own pile of suggestions that we get just as frustrated as you do that we can't do them. And so we were able to kind of go back into those backlogs and start pulling out sort of those great enhancement requests that all of you have submitted. And we focused on usability, and we focused on provider making things faster and cutting down clicks and all those other things. And so that's what you'll see and hear about as part of today. So who are we? So those of us standing in front of you, sort of your educators for today, I'm Lloyd Lilly from Allscripts, and with me is Ron Baum and Jeff Lyon from Concentra. And they're going to co-present with me through these 15.1 new features. So what are you going to learn? Sort of as our class today, we'll take you through the 15.1 timeline. We'll take you through some, and because I won't have enough time to do all of them, believe it or not, in the time we have allocated, the 15.1 features as well as sort of the benefits of those features. And as you learn about these features, and as you learn about even more that, come later when you read release notes and those kind of things, and you still don't understand, well, why would they do that? What's really the benefit? Trust me, we really went through sort of an exhaustive plan as to like which things to do and why to do them. So we really do articulate the benefits of the things that are included in 15.1. So if it's not clear, please ask, because there really was an intention around everything that we're providing. So before we start, I kind of would like to ask sort of those of you in the audience, how many of you are sort of physicians, clinicians? Good number. And then how many of you are more on the IT, keep Touchworks running? So a greater number of you, I'm going to guess like a 70-30 split. And the only reason I ask that is because obviously as we go through the features, some things are going to be sort of more important to you depending on what role you play. So from a timeline perspective, so we are soaring towards general availability in December of this year, 2015. We are currently engaged with early adopters and early validation customers. Some of those that have come into the innovation lab and are helping us in that process, the quality assurance and getting feedback from there. And then we have some customers that have signed up to put it into their test environment and take it live. And those processes will happen from now through the end of the year, culminating in general availability in June. So there's like so much to talk about. I really had trouble figuring out from a presentation perspective exactly how to do this. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some things at this high level, and then we're going to talk about some things at a low level. But before we do that, I want to talk about something really important, and that's quality. And so you've heard us talk about in the last year or so from a development perspective, we've talked about sort of how we've made process changes focused on quality, that we introduced Scrum teams, that we have an agile methodology, that we've we've built more resources in North America and try to balance that out better. And we continue to do that. We continue to refine our processes, look for opportunities to improve. But with 15.1, we really introduced sort of a new factor or a new focus, and that was really around usability. And so in the meaningful use 2, we vendors were required to do summative testing. And that summative testing meant we need to go out to a number of your sites and actually perform testing, but that's after the fact. So what we're doing with 15.1 is more formative testing, and that is up front. And you might say, shouldn't you have been doing that all along? And the answer to that is yes, but we weren't. And so it's a process change that we made, and by bringing customers in, or users in early, we actually execute tests, and we get a system usability score. And a SUS score, and this is an actual SUS score that we received through some usability testing that we did. net promoter score, and that those areas where you can receive that kind of score in your functionality, you will have users that are promoters of that. So that's our goal, right? To always be 90 and above. And so this is just a test that we ran, and we essentially, take users through tasks. We ask them to kind of think out loud. If we find them struggling, what are you doing? Well, I'm looking for a button, but I don't see one. And then we record those and we analyze it. And then based on that, we move things around, we make decisions, and it's an iterative process that we do through Agile. So I just want to share with you sort of how we were making those changes going forward. So as we think about the changes that we're going to make, we always think about what are the possible benefits. So the things you're going to see in 15.1, those benefits may be in the way of time savings, they may be in the way of financial savings, they certainly may be in Keeplex, and we'll talk about sort of some real big items that you're going to save in Keeplex. And then some of them just might be in like plain old headaches and head scratching. Because I'm sure you can all think of something in Touchworks where you kind of shake your head and say, I just don't get why do they do it this way? And so we know they exist. We're tackling those as we can. And so this is a tough one to measure, right? I can't tell you with 15.1 you're going to shake your head 4 times less a day. But I guarantee you're going to see some benefits of that. So as I think about presentation skills and what we do, a lot of times when I'm reading books or whatever, they kind of say that about 10 minutes into your presentation, the audience is going to want to do that. So we're actually going to kind of spice it up a little bit, and so you're going to participate. So as we go through some of these features, we're going to do some oohs, and we're going to do some ahs, and if any of those you kind of just release by yourself as you see them, that's really okay, right? So you don't have to make these to the side. It's really okay for you to just kind of do it on your own. So let's talk about some of the high-level features. So patient engagement, and for those of you that were just in Greg's presentation, he sort of mentioned the focus on patient engagement. So how many of you know about Follow My Health and Achieve? Raise your hands. Great. Wow, much more than expected. So in 15.1, we actually did some better integration in the way of Achieve. So Achieve really lets your patients be able to report on blood glucose, blood pressure, weight, and so they can capture that information at home, but yet be shared with your physicians. And so the order details in 15.1 have been enhanced to better address that. And then kind of behind the scenes that you don't really see, we kind of had an interface in the past. We've changed it to an API that just facilitates better exchange of information between us. In the way of biometrics, so we did have to do a little bit of EPCS in 11.5, or 15.1, sorry. And what we've done is we've partnered with Imprivata Confirm ID, but that is for 2-factor authentication for EPCS. So for those of you that sort of live within New York for sure, and any of the states that will soon be mandating electronic prescribing of controlled substances, you need to do 2-factor authentication. It's not a requirement that you do it via biometrics, but for those providers that maybe prescribe a lot of controlled substances, given their specialties, this will be a way to help facilitate sort of the pain of doing that second factor. Addressing the community. So certainly from a Touchworks perspective, we are all about sort of the community and bringing sort of the data from within a community together. So I'll just talk about 3 things from a community perspective. One thing that we've heard sort of loud and clear from many of you is the IHE library, sort of the style sheet that we use for the clinical summary. It's sometimes hard to read. There's some fonts that are kind of light, that the font itself is not really readable and big enough in certain places. So there's a new style sheet that you'll see in 15.1. Okay, I see some head shaking. So that was one. The second is, how many of you are having trouble getting the direct addresses of all of your referring providers? Right. So with Med Allies, our partner that we use, they actually have access to those direct addresses. And now we have partnered with them that they can actually actually give us a file that's relative to your geographical area. So you can say all within these zip codes or particular miles or whatever. And we get a file of those direct IDs. And then we can take a tool that we created in 15.1 that will actually let you take those direct IDs and get them into your referring provider dictionary. Ooh. Yes, unsolicited. And then the third thing is really about fusion. And so a good part of 15.1 is really about what we sometimes call confusion, what we sometimes call fusion, or our community-aware EHR. And that is really the ability for information that lives in the community, DD Motion, for example, that doesn't yet live in Touchworks. So in Touchworks, I can have, problem 1 and problem 2, but there's a problem 3 in the community. I today can know that in my software, but with 15.1, I can actually see problem 3 right alongside problem number 1 and number 2 in the Touchworks EHR. And we focus on PME, problems, allergies, meds, and immunizations. All right, faxing. Just a quick note here on faxing. We have an additional faxing partner for voice over IP, and that is GFI Faxmaker. They're actually a sponsor for us, and they are downstairs in the hub if you're interested. So another big focus for us is really around the user interface and the user experience. And we talked about sort of that usability score, and so you'll sort of really hear that throughout the presentation. We introduced a number of what we call guiding principles. And I'm not going to take you through the detail of all of those, but I'm going to give you a minute to read through them. Because I want you to sort of think about what they are as we move through 15.1. So we kind of have sort of this list sitting at our desks. And as we think about sort of design changes that we need to make, we look at this list and we say, have we acknowledged chaos? Have we brought the work to the end user where they need to do it? It's almost like a checklist, right? Checklist manifesto. It's not bad to have a checklist. You can't remember everything. And so these are our guiding principles. Do we still have things in the software today that don't adhere to all of those? Absolutely. But my hope is that you will see, even as we go through this presentation, that we really started to, sort of hold on to this list and say, wait a minute, we have to make sure that we're bringing the work to the user where they need to do it, or that kind of thing. So, from a visual perspective, we've done an icon uplift in 15.1. And so as soon as you look at 15.1 for the first time, you'll see there's new icons. And what you're seeing on the screen as quotes are, we did the usability testing around those icons. We made refinements based on how people interpreted the various icons. But it isn't only about sort of a visual improvement. There were really other reasons or purposes that we changed those icons. And some was to give us sort of a visual pattern that we could use across our platforms like mobility. And it also allows us to create metaphors or other icons much more quickly. So what does it look like up at the top today? Is kind of how those icons look in the clinical toolbar. And then down below in 15.1. So you kind of, like when I look at them, it kind of jumps out a little bit more to me at the bottom in a kind of a flatter design. And you'll sort of see that throughout the application. So now I'm going to pause, and we're getting to the 10 minutes. I don't need to fall asleep, so I'm going to turn it over to my co-presenters. And we're going to start digging into some of the real meat of what's in 15.1. And to set the stage just for a second around Concentra, because Concentra is actually going to talk about some features that they have implemented and are live in their organization. And so, wait a minute, Lori just told me that 15.1 isn't going live until December. How is Concentra already live on some of those features? So we've had a partnership with Concentra for a number of years. And so they've requested, and we worked on some of these new features with them, that they had in their live environment that we've now migrated into 15.1 and included, so all of you can benefit from those same features.
So let me talk a little bit about who we are at Concentra. We are approximately 300 urgent care centers across 40 states. And we provide urgent care services, physical therapy services in all of our centers, as well as occupational health. As a matter of fact, occupational health makes up about 93% of our actual business in all of our centers. We have approximately 2,000 clinicians, 12,000 users. We see about 25,000 visits a day. We are set up as a single org, multi-site. So we have a single database that all of our patients exist. So because of kind of the patient population we see, we have patients that will be seen at one center in one state who may be seen again at another center in another state. So it's really important that we have a single record that we can see these patients across the system. We use GE Centricity as our practice management system and Touchworks as our application, EHR application. So the other thing that was kind of interesting for us is that we started this implementation in December of 2013. And we've been rolling out this product across our centers for 20 months, 21, 22 months now. We actually are going to complete the last implementation in our centers the first part of next month. So we've had, every 3 to 4 weeks, a whole new group of centers and users. So our learning curve is every 3 weeks we have a whole new group of people for the learning curve. Right? The other thing is that we do an enormous amount of government, state, federal, industry-regulated exams. We do well over 1 million of these kinds of exams every year. As a matter of fact, like DOT, we do 750,000 plus DOT exams every year. So there was a lot of, those are very strictly regulated, and the kinds of information that have to be captured, the kinds of information that have to be presented back to the states is mandated. So when we were working with Touchworks, that was one of the things that was driving some of our requests, is how can we guarantee that the appropriate information to report back to all these agencies is captured. And then the other kind of driving force was just how can we streamline the workflows for the. So what we're going to present to you in this next series of slides, as Lori shared, is these enhancements that we've requested over the last 2.5 years and received from Allscripts and have been able to implement into our systems and use. So we're going to be able to show you kind of how it looks and feels in the system and kind of the why do we ask for that, and kind of how we're using it. So we're going to start with the very first one, which is required vitals.
All right, so required vitals, this basically gave us the ability to define the required components in system delivered and custom vitals panels. So as you can see here on the right-hand side, we have a panel for a male greater than 10 years of age, and you can see the components that we've actually configured and marked as required show up and appear in yellow. And so if we look at that a little more closely, you can see on the right-hand side, the individual fields within the panel will remain in yellow until a value is entered. Also, the OK button remains disabled until all the required components for that vitals panel are satisfied. And the way we're using it in our environment, you can see on the left-hand side, the table of contents here, we have the ability to embed required vital panels into our note templates, so pale yellow will remain on the section header until the vital panels are satisfied.
And kind of the driving force behind this was, again, when we talk about this large amount of these state regulated, federal industry regulated exams required things like you got to capture a blood pressure, right? And so this was a way for us to be able to ensure that data is captured appropriately before a patient ever walks out the door, right? So they can't even get past out of this window until that data has been captured, and it just ensures that we have that information.
All right, which will bring us to our next enhancement that we received, which was required fields in the note form. So this allows us the ability to define required fields in the note form, and the note can actually not be finalized until all those required fields are satisfied. So if we look at that a little bit more closely, you can see that theme again, that pale required yellow will remain on the individual field, and these are all configured in the note admin. You can also also configure required radio groups and checkboxes. So one selection can satisfy an entire group, and in this example, we're NA to allow an output provider. And again, in the table of contents, you'll notice that the section header remains in a pale yellow, so that will signify that there are required fields in that note form, and that will remain until all the required fields are satisfied. This functionality also works with copy forward, so you'll notice a red triangle will appear in front of every required component that is copied forward. So clicking on the red triangle will actually satisfy the requirement and render that text into the note, into the current note. We also have a prompt to the user, so this is configurable. So if you try to sign and finalize your note, you're presented with the required note form items window, and OK would navigate you to the first note form with required fields that are unsatisfied, and a cancel would just return you to the note object workspace.
So as I shared with you earlier, a big part of our business is physical therapy, and the requirements of their notes are very specific, and payers require certain pieces of information to be captured. And our therapy group was really concerned that we didn't have a mechanism to ensure that that happened. So that's where this kind of was born, is how do we force specific pieces of information to be captured within the note so that we can satisfy both, as I shared, the exam kind of regulations, but also payer regulations when it comes to specific notes.
And so our next enhancement was med reconciliation from the NAW. So everyone knows currently, there we go. You no longer have to navigate and abandon your note to the clinical desktop to reconcile your current meds. When you hit rec needed from the NAW, a reconciliation window will be prompted, which will default to the current meds or current medications, and you can then record your reconciliation on that one. And we also have the same functionality for the allergies reconciliation. There we go. I'm staying with our note automator space team here. We have order from note. So this allows us to configure note forms with frequently used labs, radiology procedures, supply orders. For even faster ordering, you can avoid the ACI altogether.
It gets better.
It gets better, that's right. So let's take it one step further. You have a link to box in the top right corner of the screen. So if you were to go ahead and link your diagnoses before clicking on one of these orders, you can actually avoid having to enter into the order details window. So it's saving you clicks.
So here's an example of how we're using this functionality. Again, this was driven by our therapists. And really we use this across now both sides of our business, the medical side as well as the therapy side. But we see a lot of musculoskeletal kind of injuries, right? As kind of worker comp injuries. And so we give out a lot of supplies, right? And so we wanted to have a way that the therapists were frustrated by the fact that they were forced to go to the ACI to click on something just to get it ordered so that it could be charged, and then tasks could happen from that event. So here we created a supplies form that we make part of the note template that they can go in and just check the box of whatever supplies that they're handing out. All of the functionality related to going to the ACI and order something happens here. So if there's a charge associated with that order, the charge drops. If there is tasking associated with that order, it's going to go to a hold for, and it's going to go to somebody's work list. That functionality exists. But you're going to kind of see as we go through this, one of the common themes was, how do we keep our clinicians in the note, right? Not making them go to the ACI all the time, or go to this, or go to that. How can we keep them in the note and just take them top to bottom? Okay, so this, we think is really cool. Charge from note.
Yes.
This also was really kind of initially driven by our therapists. And that a lot of the things that they do, they were going to the ACI purely for the purpose of capturing a charge, right? So this functionality allows us to add fields to a form and link it to a you can actually link that field to a specific charge code, or you can link that field to where it'll pop up the charge lookup window. So you can have a single, this is, charge here kind of a field, and they click and then they can use all the search functionality. Or you can link it directly to a charge code. So in our workflow, kind of a business decision that we made, we don't have to use the E&M coder, right? So we want to make sure that at the end of the visit, our clinicians were capturing the E&M code. So we have a little form at the end of the note that has required fields, as you can see in yellow, that we ask the clinician to select the E&M code for that visit. Any field that's got a charge associated with it, it's got your little green dollar sign next to it, so you can, the clinician or user knows that those are charge codes associated with it. Here's a really good example too. One of the other things that we found was, and this is kind of a really specific example, example related to lacerations, right? We do a lot of laceration repair. And the clinicians would go into the procedure form and nicely document that they had done the procedure. And then we were saying, okay, and now go to the ACI and order the procedure that you just did so that you can get a charge, right? The other thing was is they would go, so we kind of had them doing that. They'd go to the ACI and then they try to go find that charge. And the verbiage of those charge codes, right? Because it's the charge code definition that you see, made no sense to them. So either they didn't actually ever go capture the charge, or when they got there, they picked the wrong one because they couldn't make heads or tails of the description of the charge codes. So by adding the fields to the form, as you see here, we can be very specific with our descriptions. And we made it very, very easy for the clinician to know exactly what they're charging for, capture that charge, and away they go. The next thing that we did is we requested and received this new when to charge function. This may not work for everybody, but again, kind of related back to that, every 3 to 4 weeks we had this whole new set of users and this big learning curve. And what we were finding is that when we use charge on order, as you know, when you select charge on order, that charge doesn't drop if that order goes into some kind of hold status until that hold status has been satisfied. And what we were seeing is people were doing work, tasks were being created going to work lists, but the back-end staff wasn't working the work lists in a timely fashion. They were doing the work, but they weren't going in and kind of dealing with the tasks in the work lists. So charges didn't drop, right? Or they dropped to a result encounter at some other point in time. That was very problematic for us. So we got this new when to charge feature called immediately, and it does exactly that. It doesn't matter if there's a hold for specimen collection or a hold for perform order. It doesn't matter. If you select a field that's got a charge linked to it, that chart, or if you place an order, it doesn't matter where you do it, whether you do it through a form or you do it through the ACI. Whenever that charge code is set to drop immediately. So if that order gets placed, that procedure gets done, whatever, the charge code drops down immediately. Finally, and I think this is the biggest thing that we actually did, and I think this is probably the biggest thing from our user perspective, is we said our clinicians don't want to go out of their note to the encounter form to do all their charging, right? This again is one of those things that may not work for everybody's workflows, but for us it's been huge. So we have now, at the bottom of all of our notes, this new function called charge summary, right? So while you're still in the note, you've been going through your note, you're documenting all the things that you did, the charges are dropping immediately, they fall down into the charge summary. And while you're still in the note, you can click on charge summary and you can review. Have I captured my diagnoses? Have I captured my all the charges that were appropriate for this visit? Are they linked appropriately? And if something is missed, I just can hit save and close, and I'm still in my note. And I can now go and document what I need to document or capture what I need to capture and get back to the chart summary. So we have now, for the most part, been able to keep clinicians from having to leave the note to go to the ACI to find things, to either order or to charge for. And we've now been able to streamline the process while they're in their note. They can go to charge summary, and as you see from here, they can actually submit their charges and sign and finalize their note right from this window, and they're taken right back to the daily schedule. Never do they go to the accounting form. So, note output progress check. This was another area that we found. We were having clinicians, and everybody knows clinicians are busy to see, we talked about see a lot of patients every day, that were writing their notes, signing and finalizing their notes, and then claims were being denied, and when we went and looked at things, whole sections of the note hadn't been completed. They forgot to do the physical exam, or they forgot to do the review of systems, or there was a piece of the note that they just didn't do, right? And so we wanted to come up with a way to help clinicians, before they signed and finalized their note, appreciate the fact that maybe something was missed. And what we came up with was note output progress check, and Ron's going to talk a little bit more about that.
So that's exactly right. And what we wanted was something that we could present to the user at configurable trigger points, so on sign and finalize, or save and close, or sign and save. And what you get is a note output progress check that will run a check against your output.
It's an Amber Alert, sorry. There he is, yeah. Everybody calls it on the Amber Alert.
That's scary, the fact that you get on every phone like that.
I guess this is
Trying to take it away.
The alarm is not standard.
Other people are excited about it.
So basically, what the note output progress check window does is it runs a check against your output document. And so once you click OK here, you're taken to the view, and the note output progress check window is presented, showing you the various sections of the note. And so basically, it's just checking to see if content is present in that section. So it's a quick and easy visual. You define in the note admin what sections you want to participate in that progress check. If there's no content present, it will be accompanied by a red unhappy face to say that it failed the progress check and there's no content present. A green smiley face means that there's content present. It doesn't tell you exactly what is in there, but just that you have documentation in that section. And of course, the NA would just stand for any part of the note that you chose not to participate in this. Down at the bottom, you'll see the progress check tab, so you can come here and view this manually at any time through the View tab. And again, this window is not presented to you, that pop-up window, unless one of those sections fails. So if you got all your documentation, it'll allow you to proceed to sign, finalize, or save and close your note. All right, which brings us to our last enhancement here, which is generic provider. So generic provider, well, let me say why we need this. In our urgent care settings, we don't always know who's going to see the patient. We have a lot of walk-ins, and so we wanted a way to basically schedule to a site kind of provider, and then be able to flip that encounter to a billable provider when we know who's going to see the patient. So, in comes generic provider. Generic provider is an application created provider with no other designation other than schedulable. So this is in the TW user admin. You can have this flag just as a generic provider. And when you use that, you can name it whatever you want. We use a 4-digit identifier for our different centers, but you can use anything of a nurse walk-in schedule, anything like that, and name those appropriately. And the way we're using that in our environment is there's one new column added to the daily schedule, which is this assigned provider column on the far right. Might be kind of hard for some to see in the back, but it actually has a drop-down window where you can then take an appointment that was scheduled to a generic provider and assign it to a billable provider. There is a security gate code associated with that, so you can give certain role bases access to use that if you want staff to be able to assign it to a clinician, or if you just want your clinicians in your practice to be able to do that. And then there's a couple ways that we can sort out the daily schedule. So you see on the far right at the top, you have a couple different filters. So you can select patients not yet assigned. So if you wanted to see a schedule of just patients that hadn't been assigned yet, so that you would know who to see next, you could do that. Or you could select yourself and you see patients that are specifically assigned to you, so you don't see what else is going on in your center. You're only concerned with the patients that you'll be seeing. So that's been pretty neat.
As Jeff and Ron both alluded to, as you saw these features and you're sort of looking at the note forms, well, that's not what my note forms look like, or I'm not sure I would use that. Obviously, based on your workflows, your organizations, these are tools that we're giving you, and then you can kind of decide sort of how they fit within your organization. So, do you want more? Yeah. All right, we got more. All right, so daily schedule. So I'm just going to highlight some of the changes that are in the daily schedule, and a lot of this takes us back to not only the design principles that we talked about earlier, but there's real purpose behind some of these things. So the floating toolbar, everybody love floating toolbar? So right now it's a necessary evil, given the technology, and we got some technology changes coming, so I'll pitch that right now. If you got a good seat in the house, don't leave, because session right after us is all about where we're going from a user interface and a technology perspective, because we have a lot of things in the works that we want to educate you about, and that session's right in here afterwards. So there's some constraints that we have that we're going to have to live with right now, but we're sort of building those pieces that are going to make things better in the future. So just to call out some of the changes in the schedule. So in the floating toolbar today, if the reason you're dependent on the floating toolbar when you're in the daily schedule is because you need to get to the encounter summary, to the quick chart, or you need to update the patient location or the patient status, you will know. So a lot of you, if you're not working from the schedule, you do a lot of choosing patients and needing to find the right one. And so in a sort of our quest to help with finding that right patient, to reduce errors, to make things faster, we've enhanced the select patient dialog. And so what you're looking at is actually in the window behind, there's a new icon sort of down that left-hand side that initiates the hover that you're seeing in the middle. So how many of you in your organization probably have, I don't know, a Lois Smith that's 80 years old and there's 30 or 40 of them? And how do you know which Lois Smith is on the phone? And so what we provide today in the select patient window is probably not enough information to make that decision. And so a lot of times you pick first Lois Smith and you go look and no, it's not her, and you go to the next one. So it's a lot of sort of back and forth. And again, bringing the work to the user. So we now provide much more information to help you make decisions. We've also added phone numbers. The home and the cell phones are right in the actual window. You don't even have to go to a hover. And we added cell phone. So today, when you do a search by phone number, it does not include cell phone. Don't know if we do that, but it doesn't. But with 15.1, it does include cell phone as well. So as that becoming much more prominent, it only makes sense to include that as well.
Yay.
Is it phone going do you identify the main phone now?
Yep, so there's phone, work, and cell.
But do you identify the main one? Because we have patients who want to use the phone or the cell
So
phone.
as an identifier of a name, we do not. So there's 3 discrete pieces of data that don't have like preferred understanding.
We end up having to use the cell phone in the home phone so that we can see where to call.
Got it. All right, check that one away. Note enhancements, right? You just heard a ton from my friends at Concentra. There's a few more that I'll allude to here, but I will plug a session tomorrow morning at 8:30, and they will take you not only through additional note features, but also sort of the future direction of note and sort of where we're going, because that's really an important piece of Touchworks. So what you're looking at here is sort of the chart viewer inline. Those of you that had seen Allscripts Clinical Note or ACN, one of the sort of the wow factors of that from feedback was the fact that I could be documenting my note kind of on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side. I kind of had a mini chart viewer where I could review notes from the referring physician and get to the detail, or I could review my previous notes, or maybe I wanted to go look at the last result of a lab, and I needed to sort of go someplace else. You have a little bit of this ability today if you open a second window and kind of, configure your screen such that you kind of look side by side. Well, essentially, we're just making that much easier, and you can have both in line. Text macros. So another piece of introduction into 15.1 that was sort of stealing from ACN was this concept of text macros. those things that you say over and over again, you can create a text macro and then plop that same text in. You can obviously go down into the note accumulator and personalize it a little bit more if you need to say something different for this particular patient. But that is a piece that's coming and we think will be a real time saver. However, that's probably not the only place text macros make sense, right? How about results verification? Do you really say that same thing over and over again quite often? So it's there as well. And we have a whole punch list of other places that it sort of makes sense, asking and others, and we're working down that punch list. We'll hit some of them in 15.1, and then some will carry over into the next release. We're trying to be very thoughtful about the prioritization of those.
Are those per user?
Those are per user. And so, and actually we did a lot of interviewing on that as far as the, do we do them at a system level, do we do them at a per user? We can't do it all at once. Where do we target first? And this was one of those areas that overwhelmingly won in the sense that it really is about personalization at this point. And so having system messages, because I want a consistent message across my organization, there was some of that, but the examples were far less. So from a priority perspective, we went with the, do it at sort of the individual user. You can also, as you're creating it, you type it sort of out once or you speak it, and then you can, copy it, capture it, and have it for the future. I'm sorry, what? Yeah. So the question is the user building these? And so the user has the ability to create those, and they are specific to them.
But can they share them?
So there is an ability to share, I'm not going to go into additional detail.
Okay.
I'm also going to take off. Okay, system messaging, consistency and standards. So system messages show up all the time, right, throughout Touchworks. And a lot of times today, they're just kind of this gray box that has a whole bunch of textual instructions in them. And so two pretty significant changes in the system messages. One is consistency around the icon. So when that message pops, you look at that icon, you kind of know how bad it is or what kind of message it is. And then the other thing is we've now made them, in cases where it makes sense, actionable. So if you think of some system messages today, we say, you did this wrong. If you want to fix it, go here. Or if you want this to happen, go there. Otherwise, click cancel and, right, we kind of just tell them what to do. And so what we've done now is essentially create hyperlinks. And depending on what instruction they want to do, they click the hyperlink. It takes them to where they need to do that work, complete it, satisfy the problem. Tasking, everybody's favorite. I will tell you, we have not diminished the backlog of tasking. It is a very big list. But, but we continue to take at least the steps to move us in a better direction in the way of sort of, adding features that we believe will help in this regard. And once we have some of that sort of, to not steal too much thunder of the next session, but as we have some of those technology changes, it really does afford us a better opportunity to kind of do some of the real requests that exist around tasking. So this one specifically, being able to reactivate the task is one of the features. So the example I like to give here is a provider is working their task list, they call a patient back, they have the conversation, they've done or complete their task, calls off their list, patient calls back. Right? And so what I can do now is reactivate that non-system generated task, and I can continue the conversation or the documentation in that regard. For the administrators in the house, you can now rename a task view. So the providers are like, what's the deal with renaming tasks? But for the administrator, it's a big deal. You don't have the task view being what you want it to be. So the ability to rename it really is, from a time savings perspective, pretty significant. Immunization, so we focused a little
That's
bit
a
on
SSMT.
immunization, and just to call out a couple wins here. There's a new column called Last Given, so you can easily scan or know when the last immunization was, and then I kind of have the coming, because I couldn't include it in the screenshot, because it's being worked on in a sprint that started yesterday, so essentially we work in sort of these 2-week sprints from an agile perspective. And so what's coming, and that I kind of mocked into this screen, was a count of how many immunizations, how many times it's been given for that particular immunization. So I kind of dubbed it a 3, meaning, I've had them given 3 times at this point. Okay. And then just to hit a couple more, and not in a lot of detail, but more to show. And this is our medication detail dialogue, and essentially, I'm sort of in line again, using the space at the bottom, show what the allergies are, and the visual and the color and sort of the direction we're going from a usability perspective, and then also a hover that gives the reactions to those particular allergies. So again, it's kind of right at your fingertips as you're doing that medication detail. So we're starting to run a little bit low on time. I'll tell you that there's more, and there's more, and there's more. And I didn't even include everything. It really is the tip of the iceberg. And I didn't go into some of the things we're doing in the ability to sort of purge audit logs and info button and CDS usability and patient queries. Sarah Christie did a whole session this morning on changes that are in patient query. And so just kind of wanted to give you at least an overview of some of the big things that will come in 15.1. So what I want you to do is really run home and start prepping for 15.1, because we really do believe that this is a release that your users and your providers are going to want, because it's jam-packed with things that are really going to improve usability, save time, save clicks, save those headaches. But before I let you go, I want to plug just a few more things. Prenatal. So just sort of in our family, we also have a prenatal release, or prenatal product, of which we did 3 releases, or we'll be delivering 3 babies, I guess, this year. 1 is already out. Number 2, we are declaring GA on, and then a 3rd release towards the end of the year. And so we've given a lot of attention to prenatal. So for those of you that already have it, just know there's a lot of richness coming in those releases as well. And for those of you that don't, but have a need, just know that we have that application. Mobility, we're focused on mobility and driving towards a release at the end of the year in that regard. And then from a patient tracking board, in June, we released sort of a new product that we call Patient Tracking Board that helps us much better track sort of the discrete intervals as a patient moves through your organization. So with that, before we wave goodbye, let's do one more ooh, and one more ah, and then we'll open it up to questions. You're like, oh my God, so overwhelming. All right, this is going to be hard. How about we go?
I want to know about on the charge. And you have to do the charge and they have to sign and submit, the physicians. What if we don't want our physicians to submit the charges?
Who does your submitting of
Our coders.
So you probably, in this case, wouldn't be able to use that feature.
I mean, can you sign the note without having to submit the charges?
Dependent.
Through
Yeah,
that?
you can sign and not sign.
Okay.
Yes.
But you have to go to a review status, and that's why that you can.
Yeah, I don't think there's any reason why it wouldn't go to, if you have that set up when it starts to be reviewed. I don't think this would be causing not to do that.
What version of Note are you using?
We're on 11.4, well, we're on V11 Note, but on 11.4.1, yeah, it's V11 Note.
V11
Okay,
Note.
V11 Note.
The orderable items that you put within the note, are they going to have like an all normal button?
Order of
So,
item to the
for
order.
example,
Yeah.
so yeah, the orders that are within the note now, some of them, it'd be nice to have an all normal button if I choose a certain diagnosis, so I don't have to click on 4 boxes.
Yeah, currently we don't have that functionality. The one thing I actually didn't mention about orders from Note is right now it is designed to be in a specific section of the note called recommended orders, and in a specific form type, right? So you can't stick, or like you can I can stick charging note on any form in the application. Order from note is specific to that one form in that one section, and which you cannot order net admin or prescriptions from that, but you can order labs and breakdown.
Patient instructions.
Yes.
Reminders?
Reminders, what about reminders?
Can you place a reminder through that section?
You know, we didn't do that, so I honestly, I don't want to say no or yes. I don't know for sure.
Be
We
useful.
didn't try to use reminders.
Test that out.
Like colonoscopy?
I think the only thing that you can't do is the meds and
It's not,
med
a
admin.
reminder is not an orderable, so it'd be a different.
Oh,
modality,
okay.
so,
Right, we definitely have to look at
yeah.
that.
So going back to the note output progress check, can we customize it according to the type of notes? If it's ambulatory, say visit, we don't want a full review system, but a health maintenance, we would want it. Otherwise it'll keep showing up as a flag when we really don't want the flag.
So note output checking is completely customizable by note and by note output. So if you have 3 note outputs tied to a particular note, you can have that checking different on all 3 outputs. The question was, can they customize that progress note checking to the note and to the outputs, and you can. It'll automatically tell you. So if you've kind of done the whole piece of the note, you never will ever see that check.
As it relates to tasking, can you task more than one user, not team, user?
So you cannot in 15.1, that's definitely one of sort of the backlog items, and sort of this ability to, more treat it different than just tasking and more like email and whatever. And we have not, in full transparency, done that in 15.1.
Okay.
That's okay.
The orders will